Well, since this debate prompt was a comparison, let's take a look at what we're comparing and see what joining the EU has done for the countries that participated. Homicide rates have dropped by 75%. The UNODC has reported a 63% decline in drug use. Inter-UA trade goods went up by 501%, which went from 665 billion to 4 trillion. EU trade services went up from 107 billion to 3 trillion, a 1,696% increase. Nominal GDP went up 223%. Purchasing power went up 60%. The single market approach has accounted for an extra 4% of GDP growth. The EU has become the largest trading bloc, accounting for 14% of global trade in goods. Poland and Malta saw their economies double in this time. Eastern countries have had similar luck with, prior to this, only having 32% of the comparable US GDP per capita to now 55%. After joining in 2004, Lithuania rose from 42% to 90%. And this also trickled down to households with income growing by 95%. And an extra 5.8 billion being from going from 5.8 billion to 78 billion in 2024 for the GDP. Newer member states have had similar luck, going from 41% in poverty to 17%. Members of the free movement enjoy something called the four freedoms of border-free travel, the ability for citizens to live, study, work, and retire where they want. They have over 448 million citizens and roughly 500 million total consumers when you include the EEA. 27 countries have directly benefited from this country's stabilized and improvement. Now let's take a look at North America. A North American Union includes 23 sovereign nations, 621 million people, which is 8% of the population, and represents 1/3 of global GDP and about 1/3 of natural resource. Wow, that's a lot of resources and labor. How do we know that can work? Well, let's first take a look at NAFTA and the USMCA, but for this conversation, I'll call it the CUM Trade Alliance. The CUM Alliance alone has made 85 trillion worth of wealth. Intra-trade regional trade has grown by 37%. As of 2024, Mexico and Canada replaced China as the top trading partners of the US. Foreign direct investments surged by 123%, investing 569 billion in 2022 alone. 17 million jobs have been created across North America, 10 million of which rely on openly trading and exporting goods to neighbor countries. Rapid response labor mechanisms have solved 71% of triggered cases, increasing wages and worker rights. The region has become a unified manufacturing hub with components crossing the border up to 8 times before vehicles are finished, showing that it's working and redistributing the wealth. Further expanding to this, to encompass a union comparable to the European Union would rapidly expand the economy, establish stability in North America, increase bargaining power on the world stage for all countries, including middle countries that previously would have had none, decrease crime, lower illegal immigration, and restore manufacturing to the region while creating jobs, eliminate currency imbalance, reduce reliance on IMF loan systems, and incentivize peace.
That was a lot. A lot of it's pretty cool, pretty positive stuff about Europe's integration over time, which I don't think anyone would dispute. But would this union include like a shared currency?
It could.
It could. I mean, if it's like the EU, then it would probably be like a euro, right?
Yes, it could. Again, with the EU, not every country is on the European.
So how do we deal with the imbalance between, like, Mexico, for instance, is quite a different level of development compared to the US? Do we just let Mexico use the US dollar or like take out debt securities, or how would this work? Would we just use the dollar?
Integration the same way that Europe did. You build up the economies, and over time, they can join in on the currency.
It's positive as it relates to like to the euro in Europe, for instance, right? Mexico is a country that's kind of destabilized, and I guess what I'm trying to say here is there's like an institutional threshold problem, as opposed to most European countries that don't have that.
I mean, a lot of European countries started from a way poorer and more unstable location, or especially when it came to like post USSR. A lot of the Eastern Bloc like suffered, and they've been integrating.
Most of those countries aren't in the EU though, aren't they? I'm pretty sure only like 2 or 3 of them are, right? I mean, I'm missing out on the Balkan or the northern countries next to Finland, but most of those countries are not really in the EU for that reason, kind of.
Well, I mean, we have, well, depending on what you mean by the Eastern Bloc, you have 11 countries, but I mean,
yeah.
Those 11 countries. Okay, go ahead.
How would you kind of factor in the thermostat problem or like optimum currency area theory? Do you know what those are?
I'll go ahead and give you time to go ahead and answer that question, Kay.
Okay. So I'm not fully engaged with the problem that you're referencing.
I just want to start with a quick reality check. Okay. I get why this feels kind of exciting. Okay, all the positives that Kay mentioned were pretty great about Europe. It's the promise of less friction, less paperwork, less waiting around. But once you call it a union, you're not talking about trade deals and handshakes anymore. You're talking about shared authority, shared liability, and shared crisis. That's entirely different than like NAFTA or what he mentioned with the Common Alliance, I believe. Now, a union runs on trust, and trust is built on consistency. Right now, Mexico has real strength, but its institutional reach and public safety aren't consistent at all across its regions. And that's not really me being cheap or making a cheap shot. It's just the current reality of Mexico. In a union, uneven enforcement doesn't stay local, it spills outward, and the stronger system gets stretched, the rules get bent, and the union starts living on expectations. Then there's the currency question. A common money, euro-like, would hand the dollar stability to a 3-speed economy, like sharing one thermostat. It sounds fair until a crisis hits, and suddenly someone is eating inflation, bailouts, Mexico wanting to develop more, and then punishing interest rates. So no, I'm not rejecting cooperation. I'm rejecting a leap into shared authority before the basics are steady. If the rules won't land evenly and the costs won't land evenly, the union won't feel like unity. It'll feel like a permanent triage. We all respect the word union because it sounds like solidarity, but reality doesn't salute our ideals, and a union built on instability is just a label taped onto a fault line. That's my opening.
Do you acknowledge that the American founding principle is that of a collective union?
Yep.
Do you think America is better off because of the unified 50 states?
I think it is, yeah.
Do you believe workers should have freedom to live, work, study, and retire where they please, as long as it's consensual?
Can you say the question again?
Do you believe that workers should share in those 4 freedoms that I listed, if consensual, of living, working, studying, and retiring where you wish, as long as it's consensual?
I guess, yeah.
Do you think other countries would be worse or better off trading with the U.S. within a free union?
Which countries are you talking about?
The other countries that would participate in the union. There's 23 of them.
Okay, so we're just talking about North America, right?
Yes.
I think Mexico may benefit in the short term. I'm not sure about the long term. The U.S. would most definitely not benefit, and Canada probably would not benefit.
Do you think people would be more or less free under an expanded North American Union?
They would not be more free if we just made a union between Mexico, Canada, and the U.S.
That's the end of my questions. Yeah, I would like him to start with like the money thermostat if you want to go there. Do you want to elaborate on like pinpoint and specify what you think the major problem is?
Yeah, so the needs as well as how the U.S. spends money are going to be greatly different than Mexico, right? Now, you probably could quickly think that the same would be true for something like a European country that's near the Eastern Bloc, like you mentioned earlier. But Mexico is not in any way close to being developed, even in the same realm as, let's say, Poland, okay? At the end of the Berlin Wall falling. Mexico is institutionally extremely weak, and creating a union with them wouldn't really benefit them or benefit the U.S. And what I mean by the thermostat would be we have 3 different countries that are trying to do 3 different things, because Mexico needs to do something other than what the United States does right now to make sure it's institutionally strong. And then we could probably talk about this. But right now, it's not even, it has nothing to bring to the table. And I don't mean that to be like negative against Mexico inherently. It's just, it needs to develop more.
Yeah, but I mean, the prompt doesn't say, do we need to right now form an American Union? Obviously, you can do incremental milestones to reach this goal. It's a general question if we should do that. I mean, the timeline could shift.
I think we should not do it right now.
Yeah. Okay. Like as in like snap your finger right now. I think pretty much every economics professor would agree with this. I think this would be something that you roll out over time. I mean, you can probably do it with Canada,
I want to address
States,
that. Do you know for a fact that Mexico will at some point be able to meet the expectations that we're talking about?
No, nobody knows anything for a fact.
Okay, so what you just said is not relevant.
This is ideals.
Because you can't just assume. You can't just assume it'll happen in the future if you don't know whether or not it will happen.
I'm not assuming. I'm setting benchmarks for us to try to achieve. The idea is, should we try to be achieving a economic union similar to how Europe chased and achieved it? Yeah. You're arguing timelines.
A lot of things in the world we probably should do. Whether it's pragmatic or actually works is a different question.
Yeah. And every step that we've taken closer to union-like behavior has benefited North America substantially.
You mean benefited the United States?
You're saying that Canada and Mexico did not get anything out of NAFTA?
I mean, no, they did. They did. We got the ability to not have any import tax or like excise fees, things like that. And then it kind of made the American worker probably a little worse off, if I'm being honest, but
it's worse off when we have more jobs and higher wages and more economic financial investment into America. Seems kind of weird.
NAFTA does more than just that. I mean, what do you think NAFTA does?
Well, there's quite a few things. I mean, you would have to be specific on what you think that it is. What do you think
it makes more jobs for Americans?
How do I think? By a pretty much long story short is that by expanding our trade with other countries, where you need to have people to make these parts, ship these parts, assemble these parts, shift around how these parts are going. As I stated, they cross the border.
NAFTA allowed companies to build factories in Mexico and Canada, shift the jobs out of the country, and then let them come in with no taxation. So I don't know what you're talking about. That's why a lot of things are assembled in Mexico and Canada.
It set new rules for automotive, set labor standards. It increased our digital trade as well.
It set labor standards for the countries that are in NAFTA, yes, like Mexico. They have to build, assemble the cars to a standard, yes. That doesn't mean it made jobs for Americans.
Why don't you think it made jobs? Like, do you have any statistics that show that it didn't make jobs?
No, I think it'd be pretty hard to actually prove the negative here or the positive. I'm sure someone could probably see the effect of it, but NAFTA on its own is a free trade agreement that allowed companies to build factories in Mexico and Canada and then import those goods after they were assembled with no taxation. So I'm not sure how that would really, it just doesn't logically make sense to say it'll make jobs.
Because people need to facilitate this. You have to facilitate the imports, the exports.
It allowed Mexican truck drivers even to come across state lines. So, I mean, Mexican workers were able to facilitate it as well. But I feel like we're a little off topic now. How would you deal with the fact that many parts of Mexico are like on the level 4 don't travel list, as in like you probably don't have any freedom to actually go to those places right now, to be in direct contrast to what you said earlier?
I think that we should be in contact with the Mexican government and provide military aid to help pretty much clean up a lot of the situations there.
Do you think that'll help? What are we going to do? Just like roll through the jungle and carpet bomb everyone? I feel like
no, we don't have
Mexican
to
government cannot handle it right now because of its institutional strength. But
the institutional
how would you go about doing
Mexico or the cartel?
Institutional strength in Mexico. The government is not. It doesn't have the ability to stand on its own yet. The cartels essentially
That's why they would need help from the U.S. That's how, making pathways to build a union would probably start by the U.S. Negotiating with Mexico for resource deals and trade deals in exchange for.
We do that already. We don't need a union for that, though.
In exchange for military intervention there. You don't need to do it, but it's preferable.
The problem with military intervention, man, is that these are Mexican citizens, right? And I mean, how are you supposed to know if someone's in a cartel?
I mean, we have one of the most advanced tracking systems.
I'm talking about every single person you come across. And
you're not going to know if every single person is in a cartel, but the cartel has to travel in caravans to dispel the drugs, pretty much. The most of it is legally going through ports of entry as well. So if we negotiate with Mexico,
I want you to understand it's going to be a lot harder than just sending the military in when it comes to.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take also tightening the legal entry ports and the border and doing more thorough inspections, which is going to need more people, more money. This is something we can negotiate with Mexico.
Okay, you know that this probably, even if we did wipe out all the cartels, that may leave Mexico vulnerable to where people who aren't the cartels could just fill in the space, and it could end up being worse. Do you think we should take that risk?
Yes. Why would you do nothing about the cartels and let it sit? Take the maybe risk and speculation that something might get worse if you try to address the problem.
I mean, historically speaking, I think we can probably say it usually ends up worse. But
historically, in what regards? Like, who are you pointing to? Like the Middle East? Or?
Probably every Latin American country in South America.
Sorry, when's the last time we decided to have consensual talks and unilateral agreements with Latin America to help dispel cartels?
No,
last time
when we try and do nation building. I'm throwing in nation building a little there.
Well, the nation building that you're talking about is on unconsensually going in and overthrowing, like a socialist leader here, or funding a business.
Consensual. Most of those are consensual with at least some people in the country. So,
at least some people. I mean, we're talking about two different approaches. I do not believe in doing this by pure force. I believe that the only path forward to cleaning up this continent and having this unilateral trade is through consensual bridge building between the nations.
One last thing, because I think again we're getting off topic, but how do you know the people you're talking to consensually are even trustworthy?
I mean, same way that we do with anybody, pretty much. We talk to them. If they hold to the agreements,
we do know when Macron from France, even though he's a weirdo, okay, we do know he's at least trustworthy, but we don't actually when we talk to Mexico at the moment, unfortunately. But I want to circle around to how migration would kind of work. Okay, so if we allowed Mexico to come into a union with the U.S., what do you think would happen to wages in the U.S.?
I think that overall they would grow and or remain the same.
How much does a bus driver in Mexico make per day, and how much does a bus driver in the U.S. make per day?
I don't know. Do you have the stats right off the top of your head?
I don't. I can tell you a Swedish one, but my point is that you all know it's a lot less. It's a lot less in Mexico, right?
Yeah.
So if you are a Mexican citizen and now you're in a union with America, why are you just going to stay being a Mexican bus driver? Wouldn't you just go to America and make 60 times more money driving a bus doing the same job?
This is, again, under the presumption you have that you would instantly snap your fingers and do this. The building up of
I'm just addressing the question of whether or not we make a union with Mexico. I mean, do you think there should be no migration movement at all, or?
I didn't say there'd be no migration. Obviously, at different phases.
I didn't say you did. I'm just trying to figure out what you mean by a union.
I could be able to answer that.
Yeah.
Thank you. So at different phases, you're going to have different levels of integration. You don't just say, hey, everybody come over immediately. You have to build infrastructure and stabilize the country before you lift a lot of the restrictions that are in place. Eventually, you would have more and more.
Are they going to use their own money or our currency?
They would most likely stay on their currency for the beginning phases with the option to buy into the American currency. I mean, they already hold a shit ton of it as its reserves, but they could transfer over into the US dollar.
Mexico?
Every country has a shit ton of USD in their reserves.
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot. A lot of countries have a lot of debt too. It's fun. That's not that much. I promise you. Mexico dumping their treasury bonds of U.S. dollars wouldn't really do much.
I didn't say they should dump U.S. bonds. I don't know why you're referencing that during this.
You mentioned their amount in reserves, right? So how much money in U.S. dollars they have, but
yeah, but why does
so
that?
they would use their own. They would use their own money. Isn't this just kind of like not doing a union then, and then just like waiting until they're like institutionally
You already
stable
admitted
enough
that it's still a union when the European Union was. I mean, when the European Union started, not everybody adopted the euro, and they still not every single participant adopts the euro. Even the UK, like, literally kept the pound during this. You're making
they did.
assumptions.
Well, I'm not making assumptions. I am trying to figure out. My questions are questions. We're just trying to figure out what you mean when you say union. I mean, the prompt is pretty clear. But that's why I'm asking you questions on what you.
But you
what
said yeah, they did. They didn't
to be.
drop the pound. What are you talking about? The UK still operated on the pound when they were part of Europe.
No, I said that. I said they. You were right. I didn't say you were
Oh,
wrong
okay.
where
Sorry.
they dropped the pound. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, that was miscommunication.
I'm just asking. I am just asking questions to figure out what you mean by union, right? And to me, it seems like it's not really much of a union at the moment.
It isn't as much of a union at the moment. Yes, that's why you build up the unions. It takes time.
Okay.
A tree isn't a tree when it's a sapling. It's a sapling and then it becomes a tree.
Would you support the formation of a global union similar to what you're proposing for the North American continent?
I mean, if it's a global union, then you wouldn't really need a union at all, unless if you just mean like, hey, we all just agree to the same like terms. Wouldn't really be necessarily. I guess yes, if everybody is just agreeing to the same terms, I don't see why if everyone's consenting, why you wouldn't do that.
Do you believe that the states are benefited equally by the United States' union?
No, they're not benefited equally, but they do benefit overall.
The North American countries that you listed, do you have a general breakdown of the GDP differences?
I do of Canada, United States, and Mexico, but I couldn't find all the data for all like 23 countries.
I'm not sure GDP is a good metric for this right now. GDP can be very fluctuative or like can fluctuate a lot, and it doesn't really tell a good story of how the country is economically doing. It's like an important indicator, obviously, but
how disruptive is the differentials in the development across the countries?
Extreme.
Okay.
I mean, between Canada and U.S., if you want a real answer, sorry, Canada and the U.S., not so much. It's not extreme, but unfortunately, Mexico and the U.S., it would be extreme.
To the best of your knowledge, has NAFTA created or led to job creation in the United States?
I believe that it has supported jobs in the U.S. and have created jobs. He is right that it's like highly debated because it depends on how if you want to consider it the trigger or if you think that because of this it opened a pathway to others. It depends how many dominoes you want to go. The number that I think is like important to rely off of that I think is a fair like middle ground on that is that 5 million jobs were expanded upon in the U.S. To support and facilitate the commerce trade between Canada, U.S., and Mexico. And from supported, you can go on like it's not direct creation.
Do you, to the best of your knowledge, know of any jobs that were created by NAFTA in the United States?
I don't know of any. I'm assuming that there probably was an adaptation and jobs were made. Is it like a reasonable number that we would care about or something significant? I don't think that would be true. I mean, NAFTA, again, if you read through it, which I'm reading through it again, it eliminates all the tariffs between the countries. It essentially allows for Canada and Mexico to import into the U.S. or companies to import in the U.S. with no penalties. So again, it allowed companies to take jobs out of the United States, like factories, move them to Mexico to get cheaper labor, and then import the product with no tariffs and no penalties. So whatever amount of jobs it did create, I'm curious to see if anyone's done any cross-section analysis with how many jobs we lost because of it.
Yeah. So in closing, I want to point out a few things. The argument so far against this is that Mexico is unstable. Having unstable neighboring country is detrimental to America. You will be flooded with a lot of illegal immigration. You will be constantly dealing with cartels, and you're going to be constantly having to deal with unrest in a southern country. Through taking the steps to develop a North American Union, we start taking the steps to alleviate these problems and start building up our neighbor to alleviate problems of immigration, cartel, and the drug trade into America. To do nothing is to accept the loss of many American lives and to keep poverty because we're too afraid to take steps forward. Just because we need to travel 500 miles doesn't mean that we shouldn't take the first steps, which we have with NAFTA and the USMCA and our consistent growing trade with Canada and Mexico over China. What I have provided is a lot of facts that support why this could help us and why we've taken steps that have already helped us and why we should expand on this. As I've said before, Europe doesn't, just because America's currency is strong, doesn't mean that every other country has to instantly accept it. BRICS doesn't all share a single currency. The European Union doesn't share a single currency. And I don't think that an American Union would necessarily have to share that. What I have shown is instead of what ifs and what about these and what about isms, I've provided fact after fact of viable data showing the benefits of the EU has received and related that to how an American Union can start and the benefits we can receive. My stance is clear, is one that supports prosperity through consensual mutual aid, not forced integration, one that sees a rising tide that would lift all boats, one that not only stabilizes and grows America, such as you and I, but spreads it to our neighbor states, creating a more prosperous and safe life for everyone involved. My approach is one that allows growth in ethical ways, that continues to promote the ideals of natural rights, expanded freedoms and liberties in the pursuit of happiness. This trade is not a zero-sum game. It requires cooperation that took us from wandering animals in the forest to being capable of seeing and understanding the farthest reaches of the universe. Even something as simple as a cell phone must be made from metals of mind workers, using tools from other workers, shipped to other workers, assembled by other workers, and ran on software from other workers. It is clear, together trade, we live a more prosperous life. I would like to see a world where the prosperity expands with our ability to connect with others. I want to see a future where we bypass these systems and aren't afraid of taking the steps forward. The future is building bridges, not avoiding them with what ifs.
I think I'll close by saying that while the benefits of EU are there, the European Union are there, it is pretty faulty and a little bit naive to think that the cross-country analysis there, which is probably one of the weakest forms of economic argumentation, can overcome the institutional threshold problem with what we're talking about here between a union of Canada, Mexico, and the US. The monetary issue, monetary sovereignty, and again, the optimum currency theory. I haven't heard any answer on whether or not the shared currency would be safer when it does happen, and how shocks would work, how labor would move. And then there's definitely going to be a massive issue with crisis politics and the legitimacy of them. I mean, even right now we have in the US a very serious problem. And even in a union could be technically possible, it can create reoccurring political conflict. And right now this country seems to have a problem with itself in the United States. I can only imagine how much worse that would get when Mexico is in a union with us as well. And I don't agree with it, but I do think it is a predictable fault line at least. And then we did hear a lot of it gets easier as time goes on. So the integration story, which is very true. if we just assume it is true. It did work out for a lot of the countries in the European Union, but there's no reason to just think that we can just presuppose it in this case, unfortunately. And we also didn't really get an answer to whether or not different needs, are going to have some sort of policy gridlock. How representation would work within the U.S. Constitution. Do they get the same vote, even though they've contributed far less in terms of wealth? If we're just going to stick to an economic term here, I just don't see those questions being answered at all. I don't see them any reason to presuppose them. So I think I'll just close with that. The integration story isn't good enough for me.